The golden age of Cybertron has become a legend. The arrival of the era of rust has devastated our spirit. Now we have to make a difficult choice again, whether to continue following the already stagnant Parliament or to try to find a new path. I am the archenemy, I am here, and I will always be here. I will always guard Cybertron and my fellow countrymen. When you receive this message, we have already launched an uprising in Kalon to overthrow the corrupt rule of the Parliament. I cannot give a response to what the future will be like, but I want to try to find a path different from the Parliament, a path with hope for the future of Transformers. Now, let's transform and go. Keywords of the novel. Transformers starting from the Battle of Cybertron, no pop-ups. Transformers starting from the Battle of Cybertron complete collection, download TXT. Transformers starting from the Battle of Cybertron latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. The most chaotic city on Cybertron. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. The most chaotic city on Cybertron. Kalon, the most chaotic city on Cybertron. Thieves, wanted criminals, speculators, and explicitly prohibited gladiatorial arenas all exist here. If it weren't for the great freedom of choice given by the Iron Castle Council to various cities for development, it is estimated that some legislators would have proposed the destruction of Karen long ago. In their view, this city has become a stain on their careers and even their race, like a gathering place for garbage on Cybertron. Regarding this, member of the Senate, Decimus, also believed the same. The name Decimus is not his real name, but his honorary name. As the presence of several alien colonies added to Cybertron during the Golden Age, he gained glory and status, as well as the wealth that came with it. But all of this came to an end with the arrival of the Rust Age. Rust disease is terrifying. For Transformers, this kind of death cannot even bring them back to the source of fire, they can only die tragically in howls and decay of their bodies. Even the scientists of Transformers have tried their best to achieve effective control over iron rust. Rust disease is so terrifying. There are even more Transformers that have died in hundreds or even thousands of cycles than in the Golden Age, which has attracted the attention of the Parliament. When the 13 members of Parliament listened to scientists' views on rust disease and learned about its transmission routes, they despairingly discovered that this virus was like targeting their Transformers race. Even the most advanced medical technology cannot be cured by the best scientists and doctors. Under helplessness, the Parliament made a decision to blow up the space bridge connecting various colonies for the future of the race. Then it destroyed the largest space bridge over Cybertron to prevent colonial personnel from bringing rust disease into Cybertron. And with the help of the materials accumulated from the Golden Age, a large number of static storage warehouses were made to provide safe passage for the breeding population through the Rust Age. And the result is just as expected by the Parliament. When the quiet warehouse opened, the Transformers left and investigated Cybertron. They found that the Rust Age had really passed, and lawmakers and Cybertron residents cheered for it. But at the same time, they also discovered that a floating sea of rust had appeared in Cybertron at some point. After extracting components for investigation, it was finally determined that the Rust Sea contained components that had decayed their bodies. Therefore, the members of Parliament made what they deemed the safest decision to continue blocking Cybertron to prevent the recurrence of iron rust. Afterwards, the Parliament began to reassign Cybertron, and along the way, Decimus also retired and became a member of the Senate. Now he has mining rights for more than 10 veins and a large number of miners working for him, and now he is going to Kalon to deal with some things. Who is currently appointed by the Parliament to control Karen. Riding on a luxurious airship, Decimus enjoyed the sweet energy liquid while asking the guard standing not far away. He rarely pays attention to political changes anymore, and now he only wants to extract more energy for himself to enjoy. Of course, when going to Karen, you still need to visit the city lord who controls Karen. After all, Cybertron has long been a city-state system. And what he is going to do next is highly likely to cause a mining riot, and he may need to trouble Karen's security forces to assist in suppressing it. Just as Decimus was pondering what he needed to pay in exchange for the assistance of the Karen security forces, the guards quickly discovered the personnel sent by the Parliament to Karen. So he put away the holographic projection search machine in his hand and respectfully said to Decimus, "Your Excellency, the Council sent Sentinel Prime to Kalon. Some newspapers have reported that Sentinel Prime rarely appears at large gatherings. And in the last public meeting of the Parliament, the Imperial enemy publicly refuted the views of the glorious Councillor on maintaining the status quo for the next 1,000 cycles. Saying that this approach will lead to the extinction of the race in a war without visible gunpowder is a chronic death." After that meeting, only a few decades later, the Imperial enemy was transferred from the Iron Castle to be in charge of Karen and became the current Lord of Karen. Upon hearing the report, Decimus knew what kind of presence the Consul of Karen was. Well, that's right. After all, he's a guy who hasn't seen iron rust disease before. He actually wants to enter the universe again when iron rust disease has just left us. What does the survival of the race really mean in his heart? Decimus also strongly disagrees with the statement made by the heavenly enemy in Parliament. Although Decimus had also developed several colonial planets for Cybertron, he also understood after experiencing the Rust Age. The radicalism and sense of honor in my heart are simply unbeatable in the face of rust disease. No matter how thick the armor is, no matter how powerful the warrior is in the face of rust disease, they are useless, and even cannot return to the source of fire after death. Decimus didn't want to try again in that helpless fear. He only wants to earn energy safely now, and then return to the source of fire with all his glory in the final stage of his life. His glory is already abundant, so let's leave the exploration of new territories to the future transformers, just like how seniors should give gifts to juniors. After criticizing the remarks made by the Imperial enemy in Parliament by his seniors, Decimus silently removed the Imperial enemy from his list of bribery targets. A person who is at odds with the highest Parliament in power cannot enter the future center of power. And such a person is not worth investing in, and perhaps even the legislator who was refuted by the enemy is now secretly preparing for revenge. At the same time, just as Decimus had a plan in his mind, the distant enemy of Karen also led his subordinates out of the conference room. As the current actual controller of Karen, the body of the heavenly enemy is large, heavy, and the gold-red paint surface is simple and neat, all covering its sturdy body and waist. In addition, the Imperial enemy has broad shoulders but no luxurious decorations. From a distance, no one would think that the Imperial enemy is the consul in charge of Karen. However, currently, the Imperial enemy is also handling reports from some subordinates, and one of them quickly caught his attention. The mining of 2 ore veins near Kalon is facing difficulties, with a sharp decrease in the number of mining operations. It is suspected that the ore veins are about to dry up. Looking at the report in his hand, Yu Tiandi understood that the opportunity he had been waiting for had finally arrived. The elder came to the C.18 mine and said he had brought us good fortune, but he fired us in exchange for a more cost-effective fully automatic mining machine. We were miners from birth and had no other survival skills. Now, we have lost even our last job. Miner 71.980, everyone. The author will work hard this time. Thank you all for your support. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Guard. The upcoming storm in C16 mining area. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Guard. The upcoming storm in C.16 mining area. Sure enough, these moths should be hanged. The voice of the natural enemy is deep and powerful. Looking at the report, except for the 2 mineral veins near the city of Karen that were almost completely depleted, all of which showed varying degrees of depletion, I clenched my iron fist. The senators of Cybertron have fallen. This is a fact discovered by the Imperial enemy after crossing over millions of cycles ago. With the destruction of the space bridge and the loss of colonies, the sense of honor and courage disappeared from most legislators. They are desperately squeezing Cybertron like mechanical insects, and if this continues, this great planet will eventually be destroyed in the hands of legislators and decadent individuals. The archenemy knew he couldn't let the legislator do this, so he pressed the button on the desk in the office. The next second, the secret door in the room opened, and 5 transformers with different bodies walked out quickly and quickly lined up in front of the heavenly enemy to wait for orders. Looking at the 5 Cybertron warriors in front of him, the heavenly enemy nodded in his heart. These 5 people were selected from the supporters I had attracted during speeches in various places before coming to Kalon, and are currently serving in my own escort team. The names of the 5 Cybertans are Scattershot, Lightspeed, Strafe, Afterburner, and Nosecone, with the Cybershot serving as the captain of the escort team. To be honest, when Utiendit discovered these 5 followers, he was somewhat surprised. After all, in the G1 animation, these 5 were created by steel cables. Unexpectedly, these 5 individuals in the universe I am currently in are actually normal Cybertans. However, it's also good. In the future, there may be an additional king of combined diamond computing on my side. Recalling the scenes when he was stirring up other people's minds through speeches in various places, the movements of the heavenly enemy's hands did not slow down. He sent the message of varying degrees of exhaustion from various minds in Kalon to his own escort team. Then the heavenly enemy spoke again. Mechanism Cannon, I have something that I need you to handle now. You each bring a guard unit to the various mining areas near Kalon. Now that the number of mines being mined has sharply decreased, legislators are not philanthropists. Any violent suppression of miners by them could happen. Once it happens, we must stop it. After the heavenly enemy finished speaking, the mechanism cannon and others in front of him all nodded. This is indeed something that legislators and those members of the Senate can do. After all, after arriving in Kalon, the seemingly grand and private evil and filthy deeds of the legislators have come into their sight. If it weren't for following the heavenly enemy to Karen, they would probably still be believing the lies of the legislators that Cybertron is thriving. As a result, upon arriving at Karen, there were Cybertron civilians everywhere who lacked energy and supplies, and some even sold themselves to the arena for a bite of energy. The number of miners who died in mines due to lack of maintenance and energy is incalculable. This is already abnormal. Although Cybertron's energy is not lacking, there are still Cybertron people who starve to death. Those actual controllers buy low and sell high, control the mineral veins, and operate unremarkable businesses, creating a thriving scene for Cybertron people in many places such as Taibao. And the cost of this is that miners and people from lower social classes in places like Karen are constantly being consumed like cheap goods. Even legislators have established new systems to determine the careers of others through disguised forms. Just like a drilling machine, his transformation disguise is a technology drill exploration machine, and he was responsible for mining or in a mountainous area before joining the heavenly enemy. If it weren't for the speeches of the natural enemies, I would probably be working as a miner now. Thinking of the corruption of the legislators, the government artillery and others took orders from the natural enemies to gather the security forces. Since the arrival of the natural enemies, the security forces have not only expanded, but also incorporated followers into the government departments and security forces of Karen. He also purchased a batch of neutron assault rifles and phase shift systems from the weapons workshop on Dawn Heights, citing the large number of rioters in the city of Karen. It can be said that the weapons in the police force are completely sufficient now, and there is even an extra batch of inferior firearms that have been replaced in the warehouse. And a batch of machine tools also purchased to make up for the shortcomings in the Kalon industry. After all, once there is an uprising in the future, we can only rely on ourselves. When Cybertron loses its connection with the outside world, the space for each Cybertron's development, prospects, and actions will only become smaller and smaller, ultimately leading to the intensification of social, class, and individual contradictions. The Parliament ultimately chose to conceal its own optical mirror and remain silent in the closed and gentle countryside of Cybertron. The archenemy stood up and looked out at the city of Kalon, where the first shot of rebellion would be fired in the future. When the heavenly enemy returned to his steel seat and wanted to continue dealing with the affairs of Kalon City, a guard's connection request suddenly reached his terminal. Lord Royal Enemy, there is a request from an airship from Iron Castle to enter the airspace of Kalon City, and the airship passenger list includes Lord Decimus from the Senate. As communication began, the loyal guards handed over the report of the airship's entry to the enemy. Decimus. I understand, let's release the airship into the country. Listening to the report from the guards, the heavenly enemy spoke up and answered. At the same time, after the communication was cut off, the holder of the mining right of the ore vein near Kalon was called out, and the name of Decimus was found in the C.16 mining area. Is it really because the mine veins have dried up? It seems that we need to set off for the C.16 mining area. The Imperial enemy stood up and summoned the guards who were standing guard outside the door, then led them towards the direction of the C.16 mining area. Meanwhile, when the enemy set sail, Decimus's airship also received an entry permit and headed towards his own mining area. This time he came not only to lay off those miners, but also to replace the mining area with cheaper fully automatic mining machines and take away the accumulated ore from the mining area. A small amount adds up, and currently, the amount of ore mined in the C.16 area has reached a considerable level since the last delivery. Unfortunately, the mineral veins are nearing depletion, otherwise we could still make a fortune. Thinking of the lovely and beautiful dazzling ore, Decimus's optical mirror couldn't help but smile with joy, and the corners of his mouth curved slightly. It's almost here. You have betrayed your class and also betrayed the trust of the Parliament in you. Legislator of Glory. No, it's you who betrayed your former self, betrayed the oath you took when you became a member of Parliament, and class is just a lie you made for power. Defending against natural enemies. Thank you all. Make sure to work hard this time. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Heavenly Enemies. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Heavenly Enemies. C.16 mining area, which was originally not within the scope of Kalon City. But during the initial mining, in order to prevent the miners from escaping here, the legislators deliberately enclosed this and several other mining areas outside the edge of Kalon. After all, if the miners escape in this way, they can also follow the normal procedures to demand that the Kalon security forces arrest and repatriate them. And this did indeed work in the beginning, as several city lords before the enemy took over Kalon had assisted in capturing the fleeing miners. This situation did not change until the heavenly enemy took office. Faced with fleeing miners, the method of defending against natural enemies is to hide people, and after medical treatment, invite them to join their underground army or learn from other professions. In order to have sufficient manpower to assist in stabilizing the city's economy and diplomacy during future uprisings. And for the invitation from the natural enemies, the fugitives also happily chose to join. As for the miners who want to escape from the Parliament, the response from the Imperial enemy is that no one has been found, and they emphasize that Kalon is too chaotic and the security forces in his hands are not enough. They have applied to expand the security forces, but this application has not been approved yet. Perhaps the Parliament also felt that they couldn't control their natural enemies, so they chose to handle it coldly. The members of the Golden Age Parliament were so spirited back then, now, sigh. On the way to the C.16 mining area on a troop transport ship, the Imperial enemy once again received reports from his subordinates about the whereabouts of the Senate's Decimus airship. As expected, he went to the mining area under his name. Thinking of the actions of former members of Parliament during their Golden Age. Thinking back to now, the legislators are like mechanical insects, desperately extracting all the available resources from Cybertron. The natural enemies cannot help but silently follow the window frame of the troop transport ship and look out at the Earth. At some point, the land that nurtures the transformers has become rusty and even visible mining pits after the veins have dried up, each deep pit resembling traces left by the extraction of Cybertron blood. Meanwhile Decimus also arrived at his mining area on an airship, where he received warm hospitality from the mine manager. "Respected elder, your arrival brings joy to my flame. With the help of Pu Shun, please follow me and I will immediately gather miners for you." After seeing Decimus being guarded by the guards, the mining area manager welcomed him with joy and called on his subordinates to summon the miners who were collecting underground. The person in front of them is the actual owner of their mining area, and they must be well received. The mining area manager respectfully transmitted the recent mining expenses and mining data to the terminal of Decimus, and then stood on the side waiting honestly. "The expenses have increased." The terminal projected the expenditure and collection situation of the mining area, and as he watched the decreasing collection volume day by day, Decimus expressionlessly closed the terminal. Although the supply to miners in the mining area is determined by the amount collected on that day, it is also energy. In this era without alien colonies, any energy becomes extremely precious. With this in mind, Decimus once again made the decision to replace the miners in the mining area with fully automatic mining machines. Noticing the expressionless expression on Decimus's face, the head of the mining area couldn't help but feel the flames in his chest beating faster. Are the elders of the Senate dissatisfied with their lower mining quantity than before? But this is already the result of miners working hard every cycle of mining. With the continuous deepening of mining, it has become difficult to mine now, and the number of collected data is gradually decreasing compared to before. Even due to the energy supply system provided through collection, many miners have died in mines due to a lack of energy. Looking at Lord Decimus from the Senate, the mine manager was about to say something, but after a slight movement of his fingertips, he stopped and continued to stand there in silence. He understands that in situations of unequal identities, his words may actually have a counterproductive effect, as not everyone can accept the advice of his subordinates. As the mining manager waited in silence, he went to search for the miners and their subordinates returned one after another. Following them were a group of transformers with a large amount of rust on their bodies and holding various cheap mining tools. They were the miners in this mining area. Compared to other miners who have exhausted their energy and returned to the common god through labor, they are already doing well because at least they are still alive. Faced with this gathering, most of the miners held some curiosity and doubt, as well as impatience with the inexplicable consumption of time. They don't understand why the big shots from the Senate came to their remote mining area. Did they finally notice the difficulties of their miners? But in that case, why only the big shots of the Senate and his guards? The miners were a bit puzzled, but soon they found out. Under the gaze of a large number of miners, Decimus let out a light cough, causing everyone's attention to shift to him. Then, under the protection of the guards, Decimus ascended the high platform and began his speech. "Compatriots, listen to me. Your situation has been understood by the Parliament. Therefore, the Parliament has proposed that I come to bring you blessings. You are free, and you do not need to continue to spend your lives in the mine. In the future, the Parliament will use fully automatic mining machines to work for you. Now you can return to your family and reunite with your friends." Decimus spoke loudly. Finally, he looked at the miners below with a kind expression on his face, as if he had truly brought good fortune. Upon hearing Decimus's words, the miners below were taken aback for a moment. Immediately after the central processing unit reacted, they erupted into a deafening noise. What did they hear? They lost their jobs. This is nothing short of murder. They have been engaged in mining since birth, serving as miners, and now they have no other survival skills at all. For a moment, in the face of the oncoming unemployment, there were howls and pleadings everywhere below, as well as angry insults towards Decimus. Faced with the curses of the workers below, Decimus didn't say much, just gestured slightly to the guard beside him. The guard then picked up the gun in his hand and aimed it downwards. The next second, the trigger was pulled. Bang! Ah ah! The sound of gunshots and howls echoed simultaneously, but the massive body of the guards collapsed. In the shocked eyes of Decimus, the voice of the enemy was heard. What do you want to do to my fellow countrymen? Decimus. The voice of the heavenly enemy teacher is deep and powerful. I once heard Shockwave say that heavenly enemy is not the teacher's former name, but his former name was Sky Patrol. When the teacher becomes a heavenly enemy, responsibility comes with it, and he undoubtedly shoulders all of this. Minor 71.980, end of this chapter. Chapter 4. I am willing to fight for you. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. I am willing to fight for you. After witnessing his guard being shot down, Decimus was slightly surprised and quickly restrained his facial expression, turning to look at the group of uninvited guests who walked in openly from the main entrance of the mining area. And the tall Transformers, escorted by a team of guards, walked in. At the first meeting, he shot at the guards guarding the Elder, using neutron assault rifles with pulse bullets. Does it mean that your lord's natural enemies are dissatisfied with the Senate, or does it mean that you, Karen, feel that the Senate should not enter your private territory? Decimus doesn't know the enemy who is walking at the forefront, but he knows the security forces. The style and armament of the security forces in various regions of Cybertron are roughly the same, except for the symbols and codings representing the region. Therefore, facing the security forces, Decimus chose to take the initiative. Anyway, I am a senator of the Senate, and the city of Karen ultimately belongs to the local area. In addition, my guards were attacked by the security forces in public. Decimus felt that he needed an explanation. So, amidst the scolding of Decimus, the miners below who had just not wanted to lose their jobs also fell silent, staring blankly at the incoming enemy in security forces. Just like Decimus doesn't understand why the security forces are here, and the miners don't understand why the security forces are here attacking the guards and rescuing them who angrily rebuked the elders. In theory, shouldn't the security forces of Karen City obey the orders of the elders from the Iron Castle? After all, although the elder is not the direct superior of the security forces, he is also a highly respected existence. It is said that every elder of the Senate is a legendary hero of the Golden Age, and even the mines they work in are said to have been gifted by the council to the elder of Decimus in front of them. The miners looked at their companions in confusion. Long-term work in harsh mining environments has resulted in miners having very little contact with the outside world. They were unsure whether the security forces had just attacked the guards to protect them or for other reasons, so they had to stand and look at both sides on the platform for a moment. The remaining guards around Decimus were also on guard, each holding shields and guns to protect the area around Decimus. And Decimus looked straight at the leader's archenemy. He could tell that the Transformers at the forefront were clearly the leader of the security forces in front of him. Just as Decimus wanted to continue questioning, the enemy in front of him spoke first. Decimasi, is this what you are going to do when you come to our Kalon? After digging out our veins, kick away the hard-working workers and use so-called fully automatic mining machines instead. They sacrificed almost everything, even their lives, for this only job in exchange for food and clothing. Now you even have to deprive them of this. Or do you want to silence me after my fellow miners exposed your hypocritical faces? The heavenly enemy was not afraid of the firearms in the hands of the guards around Decimus, and walked straight forward to question Decimus. Decimus, listening to the disrespectful words of the heavenly enemy towards him, also took a step forward. Deprivation. This is the funniest word I've ever heard in this cycle. Who do you think you're talking to? I'm not just representing me, but the Parliament and the Senate. Do you think the miners' jobs are really what they fought for, given to them by the Parliament and the Senate after multiple choices? The Parliament and Senate could have chosen cheap fully automatic mining machines from the beginning, but we didn't do it because we couldn't bear to let the new Cybertans have no jobs to rely on, no energy to feed themselves. Now, the Parliament and Senate feel that it's time. Countless cycles have passed from the Rust Age to now, and miners should also have the opportunity to choose their own future. That's why this decision is a blessing for the Parliament and Senate, not a so-called deprivation, ignorant guy. Decimus spoke with a righteous tone and extended his finger, wanting to thrust fiercely into the chest armor of the archenemy. However, before he could succeed, he was grabbed by the archenemy and broke Decimus's finger. Ah! You! How dare you! The finger was broken, and the intense pain was immediately transmitted through the nerve center to the spark of Decimus. Before Decimus wanted to continue speaking, the enemy directly punched Decimus in the head and knocked him to the ground. Elder! Bang! 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 The situation suddenly changed. As the enemy attacked and the guards of Decimus exclaimed, the rear security forces immediately drew their guns and opened fire on the guards of Decimus. For a moment, a large number of pulse bullets were released towards the guards, causing their energy shields to shatter and their bodies to be repeatedly blown to the ground. When the sound of firearms firing stopped, only the archenemy and the knocked-down Decimus were still alive on the platform, and Decimus's guards had already returned to the source of the fire. I've been wanting to do this since a long time ago. A corrupt government, incompetent bureaucrats, corruption, bribery, and your selfish desires have caused countless compatriots to die because of you. Take a look below. My fellow miners have to work hard every cycle to earn a meager amount of energy to ensure their survival, and now you are even taking away this last job. You are high-ranking legislators and honorary senators of the Senate, but do you know that as you enjoy the sweet energy and chat about your past heroic deeds, countless compatriots are suffering from hunger? Although the fuel and energy extracted by Cybertron can protect all compatriots from hunger, you remain silent for dirty benefits. Decimus, who was smashed by his own punch, pulled up the optical mirror and loudly questioned the elder under the gaze of all the fellow miners. Then, in the silent gaze of Decimus, another punch completely knocked him down. After finishing all of this, the heavenly enemy turned and looked down at the miners in the optical mirror below, who were looking at him with many emotions such as disbelief, complexity, and agreement. Faced with these companions, the heavenly enemy pulled out his Yuan-Shan blade and raised his head high, looking at the scars below, gradually seeing the Shi miners in his eyes, shouting loudly. Before the end comes, I am willing to fight for you. The shouting shook the entire C.16 mining area. The leader of the heavenly enemy is a steadfast racist who will drain every bit of energy from the flames and dedicate his love to Cybertron, even if it means taking the sword off course and engaging in dangerous military actions. Drilling Machine, the leader of the imperial enemy, deeply detests corruption, mutual protection between officials, and outdated censorship systems. Therefore, he led us to choose to resist. Government Artillery, end of this chapter. Chapter 5. Confusion and Rumble. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Confusion and Rumble. Your body is mainly caused by long-term underground labor, coupled with ineffective maintenance, which resulted in obvious rust marks. So, I'll give you a proof of ultrasonic bathing. After you clean the rust marks on the surface of your body and take a short rest to replenish energy, come back to me. I'll then take care of your internal body. Miners 71.980 stood up again from the operating table in the maintenance room, feeling a bit confused, after receiving a certificate of ultrasound bathing from a doctor. Then, at a loss, he was taken to the energy supply center by the staff at the base. Here, miners 71.980 received his plate, a large cup of energy liquid, and several energy blocks. When miners 71.980 picked an empty seat and sat down, their central processing unit finally reacted and started working again. After looking at the energy liquid and energy blocks on the plate, miners 71.980 looked at their fellow miners enjoying the energy blocks on the dining table, and then picked up the energy blocks on the plate and touched them in disbelief. Not bad, it is indeed an authentic energy block in color, but why does it appear on the dining tables of these miners? Thinking back on the behavior of the heavenly enemy's violent attack on the elder of the Senate, and looking at the evidence of the electronic ultrasound bath at hand, I always feel that the Lord of Kalon City treated them too well. Thinking about themselves who started mining minerals after their birth and eventually lost their jobs, miners 71.980 couldn't understand why the Lord of the Imperial Enemy was so kind to them. After thinking for a moment, but still unable to come up with a reason, miners 71.980 ultimately chose to give up thinking. They had nothing to lose now, so they waited for the future plans of the Imperial Enemy City Lord for them. After all, I am just a miner, and I have only learned a little about Cybertron's earthly world with my mining friends who have escaped and been caught back in the mine. After giving up on letting the Central Processing Unit daydream, miners 71.980 finally felt hungry. Looking at the other miners around him who were eating, he mustered the courage to eat the energy block in his hand. When I put the energy block to my mouth and bit it down, I suddenly felt that the energy I had consumed during this cycle had recovered slightly. Upon seeing this, miners 71.980 quickly continued to eat energy blocks and took a sip of the energy liquid from a metal cup, feeling an unprecedented enjoyment. Can it be said that the members of Parliament and the elders of the Senate also live this kind of life? No need to engage in mining operations, you can still have enough to eat every meal. You don't even have to worry about the body malfunctioning. Regular maintenance and body checks can be done, and if that's the case, it's really envy for Transformers. The feedback from this taste processor always feels better than the energy I used to eat in the mine. Is it because the taste processor malfunctioned due to receiving too much energy at once? Miners 71.980 drank up the last drop of energy liquid in their cup, still unsatisfied. After enjoying a meal, they felt the feedback from the taste processor and muttered to themselves in confusion. It should be that there is really a problem with the taste processor. After all, miners 71.980 feel like they have never had such a rich meal of energy before. As a member of the EP1-10 mining area, it is only when there is abundant mining that one can have enough food and clothing. If the mining quantity sharply decreases, not only can one have enough food and clothing, but also hunger is a common occurrence. There is never a shortage of miners who died due to energy shortages in the mining area. Putting the metal cup back on the plate, just as miners 71.980 were about to leave, two voices echoed on the dining table beside him. There's no problem with your taste processor. The problem lies with the group of Transformers supplying you with energy from the mining area. Huolong is right, but it's not just your mining area. All of Kalon's mining areas use inferior energy blocks as our salaries. When miners 71.980 turned around in confusion upon hearing the sound, they saw two small men sitting on the table, whether they were mini Transformers or some kind of Transformers, holding energy blocks and looking at themselves. It's obvious that these two little guys were talking behind their backs just now. Hello, big friend. I'm confused, and this is my brother, boom boom boom. Faced with rust marks on the surface of the body, it was obvious that it was a miner who had just been rescued from the mining area. Confused and holding an energy block, he smiled and greeted his new friend, while also introducing his good brother, Bang Long Long. Hello friends, confused and rumbling. My name is, I don't have a name yet. You can call me 71.980, and this is my identification number in the C.16 mining area. Also, two friends, may I ask, poor quality energy block. What is that? Miners 71.980 approached with some curiosity. After expressing their greetings to two new friends, they were about to say their own name, but found that they had no name since their birth. They had no choice but to say their own number. Then, with some confusion, he asked confused and rumbling about the low-quality energy blocks. It seems that you have just left the mining area, my friend. Let's tell you that low-quality energy blocks are the products of energy liquid combined with some special chemical agent synthesized and compressed into shape. On the surface, they look no different from normal energy blocks, but in reality, it can only be said that the Council and those high-ranking officials in the Iron Castle do not care about the lives of our miners. And not only in your C.16 mining area, but also in our C.12 mining area, we use these inferior energy blocks. No wonder we were always hungry back then. Confused and roaring, if they hadn't escaped from the mining area, they probably wouldn't have thought that even the energy blocks would have been fabricated. That's what they earned from their hard work. How could the high-ranking officials of Iron Castle be so corrupt? How could they do this? All the minerals we collected have been taken away by them. Listening to the confused and roaring words, the miners 71.980 who had never thought that the top management of Iron Castle would do such a thing suddenly felt that the central processing unit was about to explode. What exactly do the high-ranking officials of Iron Castle regard them as? Are they disposable replaceable items? They also have lives. Isn't it true that there is no distinction between high and low levels of fire between them? Why do the high-ranking officials of Iron Castle treat them like this to the miners? Miners 71.980 don't understand. Confused and roaring were the latest friends I met at the underground base in Kalon. I never thought that many diamonds like them would be forced to engage in mineral mining, but fortunately, we all survived and left the dark and damp mines forever, but there were also many miners who stayed there forever. Miner 71.980 Megatron often likes to learn knowledge that we couldn't encounter when we were in the mining area. Sometimes, both myself and Confused suspect that Megatron wants to become a teacher after the war is over. Of course, this has nothing to do with Optimus Prime. Thank you all for your support of the author. Thank you. Thank you very much. I will definitely write well this time. Thank you all. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. The enemy's internal response in Parliament. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. The enemy's internal response in Parliament. There are many invisible professions on Cybertron. For example, in the city of Kalon, there are now a large number of electronic letters in the hands of the imperial enemy demanding that he ban various illegal professions. Not only did he inherit from the previous Lord of Kalon, but some members of the parliament also promised personal gain to make him run on his opponents. Faced with these, the natural enemies at that time chose to use excuses to evade them. At that time, as soon as I arrived in Kalon, if I casually promised to harm the interests of others, I would only give the handle to future enemies. This kind of thing is not something that natural enemies want to do. At the very least, it is necessary to wait until the eve of the uprising or after the uprising when the name is legitimate before confiscating the property. After sending the miners from the C.16 mining area to the underground base for energy supply and body repair, the imperial enemy led his subordinates back to the office building. Soon, a notification sounded, and after obtaining permission from the enemy to enter, the machine gun arrived at the enemy's office with a terminal. How about other mining areas, machine guns? Stopping the file review in the computer, the imperial enemy raised his head to inquire about the status of other mining areas with the machine cannon. The resources of Cybertron are extremely abundant. Just because the C.16 mining area and the minerals extracted during this cycle were recovered by the natural enemies, a large amount of minerals and unrefined fuel energy were added to the warehouse. If we were to reclaim all the mining areas of Kalon and integrate the transformers in the city when the army rises in the future, it would definitely catch the council off guard. Moreover, apart from the archenemy, no transformers know that there have always been friends of the archenemy acting as insiders in parliament to disrupt the political arena, in order to fight for better pre-war preparations for the archenemy in Kalon. Leader of the imperial enemy, there have been no cases of miners being expelled or replaced with fully automatic mining machines in other mining areas at present. It's just that our security team members discovered that the Gladiator was recruiting new gladiators in the mining area along the way. This is the recorder for our operation, the leader of the defense against natural enemies. Faced with inquiries from the enemy, the mechanism cannon reported all the discoveries made during this operation to the future leader who would lead their uprising, and said to lightly place the terminal that recorded the process of this operation on the enemy's table. As one of the most trusted warriors and subordinates of the imperial enemy, the mechanism cannon knew that any accident before the uprising would kill all of them. Therefore, every time they go out to carry out missions, the old subordinates of the mechanism artillery, who are defending against natural enemies, will prepare drones to record their actions, in case of any accidents that they may not notice. Well, I'll take a closer look later. The machine gun, remember to notify the security forces to always pay attention to the situation of each mine. Opportunities are fleeting, so please do your best before success. Yushiandi stood up and stepped forward to the front of the mechanism cannon. He extended his arm to brush away the rust and dust on the cannon's body, and comforted the young warrior's flame in front of him with the generous voice of the elder. Yes, the leader of the defense against natural enemies. Looking at the towering enemy in front of me, feeling the kind gaze from the elderly in the deep blue optical mirror, the mechanism cannon couldn't help but straighten its chest. This deeply trusted and entrusted feeling made the central processing unit of the machine gun unable to operate at high speed. After handing over the mining area to the machine gun and watching the machine gun leave the office building, it transformed into a Cybertron fighter jet and flew away. The Imperial enemy issued a temporary refusal message through the internal communication channel, turned around, picked up the desktop terminal, and entered the secret room. In the secret room, there was an encrypted desktop computer and a metal seat. Watching everything in the room, the archenemy inserted the terminal into the computer and browsed it several times to ensure that there were no loopholes left in the operation of the machine cannon and others. After unplugging the terminal, he was about to leave the secret room when suddenly a contact sound came from his own terminal. This is, looking at the encrypted channel displayed on his terminal, the enemy removed his terminal and installed it on the computer. The next second, as the sound of electricity echoed through the desktop computer, the archenemy sat upright on its body. Accompanied by a busy sound, the screen gradually became clear, and the old friend of the Imperial enemy in the Iron Castle also appeared on the screen. Looking at the old friend on the screen, the face under the optical mirror of the archenemy revealed a long-lost smile, and so did the transformers on the screen. I haven't been in touch for several cycles. Are you okay at Iron Castle, Shockwave, or Shockwave Counselor? Faced with the Shockwave on the screen that was providing cover for himself in the Iron Castle, the heavenly enemy was in a good mood, so he first inquired about the situation of the Shockwave. It's okay, after all, you know about the heavenly enemy. Members of Parliament have nothing else to do except hold meetings, and compared to me, how is your situation in Karen, heavenly enemy? I received the message you sent me, and the Senate's Decimus deserves it. If I were present, I would probably send him back to the source of the fire instead of being beaten to death and imprisoned in an underground base like you did. As an insider of the natural enemy, Shockwave was also very dissatisfied with the actions of the Senate and Parliament. Not only hoarding energy, fuel, and minerals, but also wanting to take action on the final work of the miners, I believe Pushin will feel angry when he sees it. The civilians handed over their rights to the Parliament and the Senate, but the return was this: if it weren't for the heavenly enemy's need for assistance in the council, Shockwave would have followed him to the city of Karen to help organize the uprising. Why listen to legislators making unchanged policies all day here in Parliament? Decimus still has an effect. Over millions of cycles, he has accumulated a significant amount of energy and minerals. Moreover, the more affluent the transformers are, the more they cherish life. They are not willing to easily return to the source of fire. Decimus, he is also like this. The hero of the Golden Age has fallen. In order to keep his remaining body alive, he will provide us with supplies, and he will provide us with assistance to the city of Karen through legal procedures. As for him, I will invite him to stay in Karen as a guest. The Imperial enemy informed Shockwave of his future plans. If Decimus hadn't come to deliver the head himself, it wouldn't have been easy to catch such an unjust leader. Fortunately, he had good luck and dared to come to their cairn in person. Since he has come, don't go back. In that case, I understand. Beware of natural enemies, everything must be careful. I will try my best to cover it up for you in Parliament and create other questions to attract the attention of the legislators. The rest is up to you. Since the imperial enemy had already determined their future plans, Shockwave thought for a moment and chose to agree, informing the imperial enemy that he would try his best to negotiate in the Parliament. Well, please, Shockwave. The heavenly enemy nodded and said. The Parliament has 13 seats, corresponding to the legendary 13 heavenly elements, and the name of the 13th heavenly element is still unknown to us. I like Fast Star, and of course, I also enjoy chatting with Fast Star's friends, but sometimes when they talk too quickly, I can't hear them clearly. Hot break, by the way, who is playing The Fall of Transformers Cybertron? When will we be online together? Also, thank you all for your support. End of this chapter. 7, Chapter 7. Olen Parks and Police Cars. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Olen Parks and police cars hanging up and defending the encrypted channel of the enemy. Shockwave turned around and left the Chamber of Secrets after deleting relevant data from the desktop computer. As a substitute for the enemy's activities in the Iron Castle, Shockwave knew that he couldn't frequently make high-profile transformers. Similarly, one cannot be too low-key, as it will only make other legislators suspect that they are using their power for personal gain. Now, Shockwave is going to secretly gather more aspiring transformers in the Iron Castle. To launch a successful uprising, it cannot be limited to just one uprising in Kalon. Other cities and regions must also have a response voice to force their cities to slow down mobilization or remain neutral in the war. The same goes for Iron Castle. Every cycle, there are countless transformers who want to obtain the right to reside here, but after a strict review process, most of them have been rejected. Over time, Iron Castle, lacking fresh blood, unexpectedly achieved the highest safety index under the protection of the elite guard directly under the Parliament. And now, what Shockwave is going to is the place that the residents of Iron Castle love to visit, called McCarthan Old Oil Factory. This is a place within the Iron Castle where high-purity energy liquids can be provided. It is said that the behind-the-scenes boss here has connections with the senior members of the council. However, so far Shockwave has not seen any legislator actively talk about McCarthy's old oil mill, as if the owner here is someone they don't want to mention. Starting from their place of residence, when the Shockwave arrived at McCarthy's old winery, it was already filled with the chatter of many transformers. It is obvious that the intake of high-purity energy caused interference in the circuit, resulting in these transformers being drunk. Watching these transformers living inside the Iron Castle. The optical mirror of the Shockwave quickly discovered its target this time, the red and blue painted transformers sitting at the bar sipping energy liquid and chatting with friends nearby. Upon seeing this, the Shockwave quickly passed through the numerous transformers in the old oil mill, arrived at the bar, and opened his mouth to order a high-purity energy liquid from the bartender. Several cycles are missing, Olen Parks. How have you been lately? After paying the energy currency to the bartender, Shockwave sat down at the bar and asked with a smile, somewhat surprised that Shockwave would come to McCarthy's old oil shop, how Olen Parks had been lately. Fortunately, everything is the same as before, after all, Senator Shockwave, you know my job. Faced with the goodwill inquiry of the Shockwave legislator, Olen Parks organized his speech and then chose a more insightful one. As an archivist, his job must be said to be envied by many transformers, but to be honest, even after millions of cycles of unchanging work, it still feels a bit tiring for Spark. The only thing that can probably make Olen Parks feel novel is probably the history buried at the deepest part of the archives. The 13 heavenly elements, the unification of Cybertron, the Golden Age, and even the end of the era have brought too much shock to this young Transformers. Yeah, work can sometimes make Transformers feel tired, but we ultimately have to go and complete it, right? The shockwave comforted Olen Parks. As a legislator he certainly knew many things that ordinary transformers did not know. For example, in addition to organizing files, the transformers in front of us are also arranged to access communication networks. Responsible for receiving communication content that meets certain standards, classifying and annotating them, and then storing them in a specific area of the data network. In order to prevent the plan from being exposed, Shockwave and Yushiandi did not even talk about the uprising in public channels before establishing encrypted channels. At that time, the Shockwave also began to consciously approach Olen Parks. He could see that there was a spark hidden under the archivist's body that wanted to change the status quo of Cybertron, if it could be pulled in. Indeed, oh, by the way, Senator Shockwave, I forgot to introduce you. This is my friend's police car, currently working under the council, responsible for the safety of the Iron Fort. Olen Parks looked at the Shockwave senator he was talking to and suddenly remembered his friend beside him. He quickly introduced his friend's police car to Shockwave senator. As a member of the Iron Fortress search officers, the paint on the body surface of the police car is similar to that of the Iron Fortress security forces, which is why police cars rarely encounter problems. Hello, Senator Shockwave, I am currently serving as a search officer. Seeing his friend Olen Parks introducing himself, the police car couldn't continue to secretly drink energy liquid alone. He put down his glass and the police car took the initiative to introduce himself to Shockwave. Police cars actually know very little about the Shockwave legislator. Despite being a member of parliament, there have been no substantial scandals, and it is even said that Transformers have never seen a Shockwave member enter Six Light Amusement Park. Although the Six Lights Amusement Park is a place that even Olen Parks and police cars want to go, they cannot enter due to their insufficient social status. Hello, police car, new friend. Faced with the introduction of the police car, Shockwave raised his glass and greeted his new friend. Great, there are new Transformers to pull in. For police cars, even without investigation or inquiry, Shockwave can still obtain relevant information about his friends from Olen Parks. For friends who can be wooed, Shockwave has always liked to release the greatest kindness. He believes that sometimes insignificant kindness may change the fate of himself or others. And this is all that Shockwave and the Heavenly Enemy once learned while chatting. As a result, Shockwave was turned onto the same ship by the Heavenly Enemy and began to plan for the future together. Kalon Underground Base Miner 71.980 followed the team to the residential unit under the leadership of the base staff after parting ways with the rumbling and confusion. Standing in line, I watched as the miners who were constantly being issued room ID cards by the staff went to search for their rooms. Miners 71.980 quickly followed suit and reported their mining area numbers, nervously waiting to successfully collect their ID cards. With rusty fingers holding ID cards, Miners 71.980 quickly searched for their own room by following the number of their residential unit. Soon, they successfully found their own room. When the ID card was entered and the room door was opened, Miners 71.980 successfully saw the full view of the room. The shiny metal walls reflected his reflection, and a brand new stationary compartment was placed in the corner for rest while reducing energy consumption. There were even portable offline computers on metal tables and chairs for Transformers to relax. This is my new home. Megatron didn't know how to use computers at the beginning, it was him from both me and the Hanlong Church. Of course, I didn't know how to use computers at the beginning, and it was us from the Soundwave Church. Confused, I'm not sure what exactly it looks like in the Six Lights Amusement Park, and Olen Parks has never been inside either. That kind of place is only accessible to legislators and members of the Senate. Police cars successfully signed the contract. Thank you all. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. The Birth of Megatron. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. The Birth of Megatron. We need to understand why we are fighting. Cybertron has entered a period of stagnation, and if this continues, Cybertron will only be destroyed in the hands of the Parliament. Everyone, take a look at what the cities of Kalon, Slaughter City, and various other places have become, but the Parliament is still immersed in their fantasies. In the broadcast at the Kalon underground base, the broadcasters pointed out a clear enemy for the rescued miners and Transformers refugees. And as long as they have clear goals, they can move forward in the same direction, which is deeply recognized by the enemy. Are there many troops in the Parliament? A lot. The Elite Guard, the space station in space, and the 2 artificial satellites in the sky all have air forces directly under the Parliament stationed. And each city also has its own security forces, and some important cities and spaceports have deployed fully equipped troops on the surface. And these were all military personnel specially provided by the Parliament to some important cities after the end of the Rust Age, in order to prevent the lower-level Transformers from being unable to find basic jobs. However, even so, nowadays, job positions are still far from sufficient. Transformers, who died due to a lack of energy, constantly occur throughout Cybertron except for Iron Castle. Of course, these are currently not related to Miners 71.980. As a newly rescued miner, he is just an honest Transformers, otherwise he wouldn't have worked as a miner for so many cycles without escaping. If it weren't for the Senate's Decimus insisting on smashing the miners' jobs, he probably would still be mining or with his mining friends now. It's another abundant energy block and energy liquid. After finishing hibernation from the time-static chamber, Miners 71.980 watched as the terminal provided by the staff showed that it was time to replenish energy. After hesitating for a moment and closing the static storage chamber, Miners 71.980 went to the energy supply center, where they received the same amount of energy supply as yesterday again. Looking at the energy blocks in the plate and the energy liquid in the cup, Miners 71.980 had an indescribable feeling. The ruling officials of the Imperial Heavenly Enemy seemed to have treated them a bit too well. They not only allocated them individual living units, but also allowed them to leave the mining area and encouraged them to rebel against the Parliament. Aren't the ruling officials of the Imperial enemies also Transformers of the same class as the Parliament? Why did they choose to help these miners resist the Parliament instead? Miner 71.980 doesn't understand, and he can't figure out many questions, such as why it's necessary to determine a profession through disguise. And the portable computer in his room, he still hasn't figured out how to use it, and he doesn't dare to use it recklessly. If he breaks it, it will be troublesome. Good morning, big guy. Good morning, friend. Sitting on the seat with a tray, just as Miners 71.980 were about to eat energy blocks, 2 greetings rang out one after another. Upon hearing the familiar voice, Miners 71.980 turned their heads and indeed saw their 2 new friends confused and rumbling. Good morning, friends. Faced with greetings from friends, Miners 71.980 also responded, watching the confusion and rumbling across from their dining table. Since learning that these 2 mini-Kong friends had escaped from the C.12 mining area, he has become even more resentful of the corruption in the council. Even the mini-King Kong was pulled to become a miner, and the council was able to do such a thing for the sake of labor. Aren't you afraid to return to the source of fire and face the gods? How about ultrasound bathing, isn't it comfortable? Big guy friend. Noticing that most of the rust on the surface of Miners 71.980 had disappeared, I was confused and guessed that my new friend had gone for an ultrasonic bath. After all, he and Xiong Long Long also came this way when they first arrived, and the feeling of rust scattered and shattered on the surface of the body with the vibration of ultrasound waves was really comfortable. Well, it's very comfortable. My spark feels happy because the rust has left. I thought those rust stains would accompany me back to the spark source, but I didn't expect to be able to get rid of them before that. Thank you to the Archbishop of the Imperial Enemy. Faced with the help of the Imperial Enemy to himself and other mining friends, Miners 71.980 expressed their sincere gratitude. This is the kindest help he has felt since his birth to the present. Although his former mining friends would also help each other, because everyone could only barely provide for food and clothing, their available help was relatively limited. And here, as the ruling official of the heavenly enemy, he felt the genuine concern that leaders should have for their peers. Here, they truly become a part of the Transformers, rather than a feeling of being treated as a consumable item, truly making even the spark feel moved. Indeed, but my friend, have you come up with a name for the future? You probably don't want to keep using the number used in the mining area until it returns to the source of the fire, do you? Sitting on the edge of the dining table, the two mechanical legs swaying in the air rumbled as they picked up the energy block from their plate and nibbled on it. Suddenly, with a loud bang, he remembered the upcoming information update for these new miners, so he asked if miners 71.980 had planned their future names. The future name. I haven't figured it out yet. When it comes to the future, the optical mirrors of miners 71.980 are filled with confusion. He can no longer see clearly what the future looks like. But he can be certain that he is willing to die for the Lord of the Imperial Enemy City. After all, if he doesn't even follow such Transformers, what face would he have to meet with the Universal God and return to the source of fire without regret? I think it can be called an electron tube. After all, your body feels very similar to the tower-shaped electron tube, Megatron, in large equipment. After carefully examining the body of my new friend, I spoke of my metaphor in confusion and uncertainty. Tower-shaped electronic tube. Am I? It seems. Indeed. Upon hearing this confusing statement, miners 71.980 also looked at their own bodies, as if it was really true. So, is that the name they call themselves? Okay, from today on, my name is Megatron. Thank you, confused friend, for giving me a good name. Confused, Megatron also felt that its body was somewhat like a tower-shaped electron tube, so after thinking for a microsecond, it gladly accepted this new name. It's really a good name, Megatron. Looking at his own face reflected on the metal tabletop, Megatron smiled and extended his hand to himself in the shadow. I feel like I have a natural talent for naming, but neither the laser bird nor the mechanical dog need my help in naming. Confused teacher Yushiandi treats all Transformers equally, whether it's a mini Transformers or a replica soundboard of Soundwave. Sometimes I can even see the tall leader comforting the depressed Transformers and encouraging them to look towards the future. Megatron, please follow up and vote for recommended and monthly tickets. If possible, please also invest. Thank you. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Ambulance and Swing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Ambulance and Swing. Our material reserves still need to increase, and once war breaks out, we will lose energy funding from places like Iron Castle. Also, pay more attention to the supplies transported by Decimus, as well as the Transformers handed over, keep them hidden, and don't let Iron Castle and other Transformers detect any abnormalities. Watching the various minerals and energy reserves listed on the computer, the Imperial enemy instructed his subordinates. War is cruel, no matter what kind of life it is for. Even tall and resilient Transformers have the potential to return to the spark of war at any time. What the heavenly enemy needs to do now is to arm their warriors with fire as much as possible. In addition, order another batch of neutron assault rifles and phase shift devices at Dawn Heights. If there are suitable drones, also order some to maintain the security of the city of Karen. Utiendi said that he sent a proof of order for Kalon City to his subordinates' terminals. At present, the machine tools at the underground base in Karen City have also started working, but due to the limited quantity, they can only produce scarce heavy firepower weapons. For example, thermal rocket launchers and so on. However, relatively light weapons can still be ordered temporarily through Dawn Heights and some industrial areas. After handing over the task to his subordinates and watching them leave, the Imperial enemy was about to continue processing the documents when another announcement sounded. Listening to the report from the guard, the heavenly enemy issued an order to allow incoming visitors to enter. Welcome back, ambulance, sway. As the door opened, two transformers with green and blue paint on their bodies followed in one after another. Watching these two transformers, the archenemy stood up and welcomed their friends. Well, we're back from the Slaughter City, old friend. The lip armor of the ambulance curled up with a smile, and then walked over under the gaze of the optical mirror that swayed his disciple and assistant, giving a big hug to the enemy. It seems that my old friend has achieved good results in Slaughter City. How about that? Are you interested in introducing me to the current situation in Slaughter City? After releasing his four arms, the enemy sat down with an ambulance and swaying. Then he asked his old friend's ambulance and his disciples about the situation of Slaughter City. As a city with a similar situation to Kalon, Slaughter City is a target that must be won over in the plan of the natural enemies. Because here, not only can we provide assistance from the lower-level transformers of Cybertron to the heavenly enemies, but we can also receive assets and mining areas from the Council and Senate here. Even, maybe you can get some capable generals here in the Slaughter City. In countless cycles, Kalon and Slaughterhouse have been like competing and synchronously changing sister cities. Kalon has its own characteristics, and Slaughterhouse also has its own, including the gladiatorial arena in the lower levels of Kalon. As the most intense and highly sought-after event of Cybertron, the arena brings excitement to the audience for circuits and sparks, and also brings huge benefits to the upper echelons. Under the protection of this chain of interests, even in Parliament, it is impossible to ban this competition. Because during the investigation, the Parliament found that the benefits obtained from these gladiatorial venues would eventually be handed over to those profit seekers. It is precisely because of this that the so-called investigation by the Parliament is nothing more than self-examination. Similarly, in this situation, there are also unprofitable upper-level transformers stimulated. So, after dozens of cycles, the Slaughter City, following the example of the Colosseum, also established its own arena. And this time, the imperial enemy sent an ambulance to the Slaughter City to investigate and win over the gladiators in the city. As an ambulance that agreed to join after learning about the ambitions of the enemy at Iron Castle and being persuaded to do so, in order to provide better assistance in the future, the ambulance also left the medical center directly under the upper echelons when the enemy left Iron Castle to serve in Kalon. It was from then on that the ambulance, with the help of its natural enemies, operated its own underground clinic. In hundreds of cycles, not only has the business flourished, but it can also be considered vibrant. During this period, ambulances have submitted more than one public application to the Parliament regarding safety guarantees and medical maintenance issues for the lower-level transformers. He often leads his assistants and disciples from underground clinics to the edge of the Rust Sea and major economically underdeveloped cities to repair, treat, and maintain the body of the lower-level transformers. Along the way, it also caught the attention of a mini-diamond bat spirit counselor from the Parliament. And this also allowed the underground clinic where the ambulance was located to receive assistance from the hometown of Mini King Kong, Moi Tiancheng. It is obvious that indiscriminate assistance to the lower-level transformers has been recognized by the mini-transformers. The natural enemies understand this very well. After all, the minions always claim that they are no different from other tall transformers. At the same time, it is believed that the differences in the body should not harm them, who are also transformers, in their work and speech. The situation in Slaughter City is not very good at the moment. Pu Shen is in charge. If possible, I really want to save those poor gladiators. The optical mirror of the ambulance is somewhat dim. As a doctor, he could only watch helplessly as the fighters who lacked maintenance and supplies were forced to pick up weapons and fight against each other for energy. Sometimes, ambulances have doubts about whether transformers really shouldn't have appeared on Cybertron. The gladiators below the stage fight to the death for survival and energy, while the audience on stage shout crazily like a short circuit of electricity. No matter how you look at it, this is abnormal. Ah, that's exactly why I want to change Cybertron, my friend. Listening to what the ambulance saw in the Slaughter City, the enemy's big hand lightly placed on his old friend's shoulder armor and said, The bottom-level transformers can only work to death in workshops or mining areas, and even if they escape, they are forced to sell themselves to the arena for fear of being caught again, becoming entertainment activities for other transformers. This is wrong and abnormal. The Parliament's closure of Cybertron has led to the closure of the channel for class rise. Our compatriots have repeated the same work in countless cycles, but still can only provide themselves with food and clothing, unable to go further. As a result, without the ability to resist, Cybertron's hopeless fellow Transformers will only become increasingly extreme, until they destroy themselves or be destroyed by other Transformers. And what we need to do is to let our compatriots see the future again. The heavenly enemy looked at Cybertron under the starry sky, which would be a war between classes until one side completely collapsed. If you like to fight, then I will definitely accompany you and bring you down. Steel rope, I hope to become a great Transformers like an ambulance teacher, but sometimes my presence seems too low, so Transformers who are not familiar with me often don't notice me. Swinging, thank you all for your support. In addition, it is currently the new book period, so please invest and vote for recommendations, monthly tickets, and most importantly, follow up. Please. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Overcoming the Past of Enemies. The Future of Sky Patrols. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Overcoming the Past of Enemies. The Future of Sky Patrols. The arrival of ambulances and swaying not only brought intelligence about the slaughter city to the enemy, but also happened to send oneself to the door. Sometimes, I feel like you care more about patience and defend against natural enemies than those doctors in Iron Castle, my friend. In the maintenance room of the Kalon underground base, the terminal containing information about the massacre city was handed over to the rear of the Imperial Heavenly Enemy. Ambulances and wagons were invited here to repair the miners' bodies. The ambulance readily accepted this and talked to the enemy about the Council of Iron Castle. As the place where ambulances were initially employed, it was more of a high-level medical association than a medical center. In that situation, even if there were no natural enemies, the ambulance felt like it would resign. Ambulances, they are not only my subordinates, but also my fellow countrymen. If I cannot even provide medical repairs to them, how should I meet the universal God and the 13 heavenly elements when I return to the flames in the future? Facing the ambulance, the lip armor of the natural enemy moved slightly and let out a sigh. Since we want to resist the Parliament, we need to be different from the Parliament. Otherwise, even if we succeed in the end, it will only be a new Parliament. You always want to help them. Perhaps in the initial speculation of the Parliament, the leader who resisted their rule was more likely to be a gladiator. After all, many Transformers now worship gladiators and believe that that is the true Transformers. The ambulance took out maintenance tools from the reserve unit, chatted with the enemy, and retrieved its own terminal. After a moment, looking at the thousands of Transformers slots added after the terminal update, the ambulance suddenly widened its optical mirror. Pu Shen is above, are you raiding Karen's arena? Or is it that the Transformers' ideological consciousness living in Karen is so high now? Nails crossed over the list projected from the terminal, and as they looked at the numerous Transformers on the list, the ambulance couldn't help but look back at its archenemy. This is just a few cycles, yet it has summoned thousands of Transformers. This was all increased under covert actions, which really made Transformers feel unbelievable. You know, ambulances, the Senate, and the Council are now looking to use cheaper fully automated mining machines. For these poor Transformers, our place may be their last destination. During this period, in addition to the C.16 mining area owned by Decimus, other mining areas have also begun to experiment with the use of fully automatic mining machines. On the other hand, another group of miners have lost their jobs. In this situation, fortunately, the Imperial enemy arranged a security force to pay attention to the mining area, otherwise these miners might have been forced to choose to scavenge. Or even worse, being forced to sell oneself to the arena to gain energy blocks and maintain the remaining body by winning a smile from the audience. You will always make the best decision you can make now, although sometimes we are not sure what kind of results this decision will bring us in the future. The ambulance agrees with the decision to rescue the miners from natural enemies. A leader should unite everything that can be united, identify their allies, and also identify their enemies. It is obvious that the enemy has made a choice. Sometimes, I feel like you, the archenemy, have abandoned the name Sky Patrol, while also abandoning your past recklessness. Looking at the towering body of the enemy, the ambulance couldn't help but recall the past of the enemy. Who would have thought that as a brave ranger, he would eventually enter politics and, upon seeing the darkness, choose to resist? The former sky cruiser died in the Rust Age, and what is still alive is only the heavenly enemy who can hear the mournful cries of race and Cybertron. Emperor Tiandi remained silent for a moment when facing the ambulance. He knew what the ambulance was talking about. At that time, he had just crossed over and had no plans for the future, so he left the choice for the future to Optimus Prime and Megatron. But over time, the archenemies of that time discovered the devastation suffered by the race of Cybertron and Transformers. The Supreme Council and Senate, the two institutions that once guided the Transformers forward, have decayed. After witnessing too much, the heavenly enemy can no longer remain so silent. So, the heavenly enemy chose to resist and changed his name from the Sky Patrol to the heavenly enemy, officially entering the political arena and preparing for a rebellion. Alas, Pu Shen is above. May we return to the source of fire after death and meet him with glory. The ambulance knows the burden on its friend's shoulders as a natural enemy. If possible, he really wants to help as much as possible, but unfortunately, he is just a doctor and cannot provide reference for defending against natural enemies in the future direction. Yes, my friend. Everything will be okay. The five-faced monster has never enslaved us forever, and the Parliament will not be able to enslave our race. Our fellow countrymen just need a leader, and what we need to do is lead them in the right direction. The natural enemy comforted the ambulance, and the uprising may succeed in the absence of sufficient reserves. But such losses are too great, and the lifeless Transformers will no longer be able to see the light of dawn. And what the natural enemies need to do is to stockpile more dormant warehouses, more weapons and supplies to protect the flames and even the lives of the warriors who are willing to fight for the future as much as possible. Only in this way can we alleviate the sense of guilt of sending our fellow countrymen to the battlefield amidst the flames of our natural enemies. Don't force yourself too hard, resist natural enemies. You always want to do your best and make up for all shortcomings. I am really worried about the health of your circuits and sparks. To be honest, if it weren't for the recent body check conducted by the Imperial enemy in the maintenance room, the ambulance would really want to come to the Imperial enemy for on-site inspection. Don't worry, until we succeed, I will safely guard my fellow countrymen's ambulance. The heavenly enemy comforted the ambulance with a calm and heavy voice, and raised his head again to look in the direction of the well of the fire source. He could feel Cybertron's weakness, as well as Pu Shen's selfless love for Transformers. Rather than guarding us, you should care more about yourself and guard against natural enemies. The ambulance admitted that perhaps it was this concern for other Transformers that led it to choose to defend itself against natural enemies. Of course, perhaps I really want to see what the future created by the heavenly enemy looks like. On the battlefield, I may need to listen to you, but in the maintenance room, you should listen to me even more, because it can help us not return to the source of fire. Ambulance, I heard that the heavenly enemy once asked the Shockwave Counselor to investigate the composition of the Rust Sea. If I hadn't heard of this, I would never have thought that Shockwave Counselor was a scientist before becoming a counselor. Oh, by the way, according to Optimus Prime, the materials used in Crystal City were developed by Shockwave Counselor. Thank you all for your support to the author. The author has always wanted to write a Transformers novel and has also consulted comics and official novels. Therefore, thank you all for watching and waiting for the author. Thank you very much. End of this chapter.